According to dictionary.com, the definition of sorrow is distress caused by loss, affliction, disappointment, etc., grief, sadness, or regret. The theme of sorrow of war refers to the idea that war is not necessarily a positive experience for the people involved in war. Many people would argue that Homer creates a balance within the Iliad between the glory of war and the sorrow of war. In the opinion of Joel Rosenthal, the value of the Iliad is Homer's realism. By wanting the Iliad to be real, Homer portrays war as it actually is. He doesn't want to gloss over the painful parts of war, but he also doesn't want to only portray the sorrowful parts of warfare. This video will be used to discuss how Homer presents the negative aspects of war and creates sorrow. Before we begin, the word chaos must be defined. The definition from Monmouth College Classics Department is on your screen now. Chaos will be referred to within this discussion many times, so being familiar with the definition will be helpful. According to Charlotte Higgins, the Iliad tells us about the atrocities and indiscriminate slaughter, about war's peculiar mercilessness to women and children. This is explored in the tale of Scamandrios, aka Astyanax. Astyanax, the son of Andromache and Hector, is a character whose fate and future is discussed plenty in the Iliad. In Book 6, Hector reveals his hopes for his son. Grant that this boy, like me, may be foremost among the Trojans, as mighty in strength and a powerful leader of Ilium. Hector's hopes for Astyanax creates a feeling of pathos aimed towards the family, as the audience would have known Hector's wish would never be fulfilled. Astyanax will die. The audience would have heard the story from childhood, so they'd pity Hector for wanting Astyanax to achieve Chaos, but never being able to. The original audience would have had a strong emotional connection with Hector, Andromache, and Astyanax, due to the Iliad portraying them as human-like as the Achaeans, as well as other epic poems including the family portraying them in a similar way. Hector's words also highlight the inevitability of war. According to Ian Johnston, the only situation he can imagine and desire for his son is one which has produced the situation he and Andromache now face. A sense of sorrow is created from the irony here. Hector wants Astyanax to be in a similar situation as his father, even though Hector knows he will not survive this situation. War is the best way to become a hero and achieve Chaos. Hector doesn't wish for peace and happiness for his son, he wishes for his son to be a famous hero, like him. This is what every Homeric father wanted for their sons, achieving Chaos through battle. The sorrow of war is clear for modern audiences who have a juxtaposing idea of war. They treat war as a last resort. They would not be able to imagine a world where war is inevitable and wanted, so they would feel pathos for Astyanax, who is expected by his father and society to achieve Chaos through war. Joel Rosenthal discusses how, in the Iliad, there is a deeply ingrained idea that war is inevitable. The idea of war being inevitable was touched upon in Hector's wishes for Astyanax's future. As Hector can only imagine Astyanax's life being full of war, it shows that the Homeric world was constantly at war. The inevitability could be down to society's willingness to enter battle. In Book 7 of the Iliad, the Trojans discuss offering to give Helen back to the Achaeans. However, after Paris refuses to give Helen back, Dardanus suggests giving back the treasures Helen brought with her, which they agree to do. Yet, when the Achaeans hear Paris's offer, Diomedes says, "Let no one dream of accepting Paris's gifts, not even if Helen were offered," since even a fool could see that the coils of fate are wound about the Trojans. The Achaeans are given the opportunity to end the war if they want to, but they reject it because they want the war to continue. They could have rejected it because Agamemnon was told by the Oracle of Delphi that the Achaeans would capture Troy after the noblest Achaeans had quarrelled, according to Book 8 of the Odyssey. Even though the use of secretly in the Odyssey suggests the other Achaeans don't know about the prophecy, it could be that Agamemnon had convinced them all they will win the war, so they are willing to stay. However, it could be the case that Agamemnon had done nothing of the sort, and they are staying in Troy because they want to participate in a war because of Chaos. If this is the case, the Achaeans staying at war means that they want to risk their lives and potentially die at war. This is due to the war being an important part of their society and the best way of achieving Chaos. Chaos is the ultimate motivation for many of the Iliadic characters, most notably Achilles. As the leaders of the Achaean world are all determined to achieve chaos, they force their people to go to war, as performing well on the battlefield is the easiest way of achieving chaos. This is why Diomedes is so willing to reject Paris' offer of an end to the war. He knows he isn't going to achieve chaos without war. This means that he wants to stay at war, making war inevitable because he is determined to achieve chaos through war, so he'll force people to stay. The audience would feel a sense of sorrow for the men due to the inevitability of war, because the men can easily escape the horrors of war, but refuse to thanks to society disapproving of the idea. This is an unthinkable idea to modern audiences who'd struggle to understand how war is not a temporary and unwelcome intrusion upon human life, but a fatal condition of life. We believe that war is a last resort, an annoying barrier between us and world peace. This is different to the world of Homer, who went to war constantly, making war an inevitable part of their society. A Western audience would feel a sense of sorrow that this is the reality of their life, because it juxtaposes our views of war. Many modern pacifists will be disappointed by the fact that the world of Homer is so dedicated to starting war, that they would pity the soldiers for not knowing any better. Higgins argues that lost peacetime is, however, most conjured up through the poet's imagery, in which we are often invited to imagine an act of great violence with help of similes drawn from a pastoral world far from the battlefield. The example she uses to emphasize her point is from Book 13 of the Iliad. As swiftly as a black bean or chickpea leaps up from the broad shovel when the winnower wields in a gust of wind on the white threshing floor, so did the deadly arrow rebound from the breastplate and fall far off. The epic simile is used to compare the arrow bouncing off Menelaus' shield to a chickpea. Pastoral imagery is also found in Achilles' shield in Book 18. The motif of pastoral imagery in the poem creates a parallel world to that of the Iliad. It helps the audience explore what the warriors would have lost after they went to war, as the act of agriculture suggests normalcy, something which none of the characters in the Iliad actually do during the war. Paris and many of the unnamed soldiers would have been farmers before the war started. The thought of agriculture and farming would remind them of home and peacetime, which they are losing out on due to the war keeping them from the Trojan battlefield. Homer uses pastoral imagery as the audience would have been used to the imagery present. The audience would have been able to feel comfort in those similes because agriculture was the norm for Homeric societies. Many of those cities would have been at war frequently, but never for 10 years or so. Their farmers would not have been away from their farms so long, juxtaposing the situation in the Iliad. However, it's also entirely possible that Homer might have been using those similes as a way of helping the audience to imagine the scene better. The modern audience would have felt a sense of pathos for the younger soldiers in the Iliad who were too young to remember agriculture. For example, Antilochus is canonically the youngest Greek prince in the Iliad. The youngest he could have been was 14 at the start of the war, far too young to remember peace in Pylos. Even if he did remember agriculture in Pylos, 10 years is a very long time and could blur his memories, meaning he would barely remember home and home's farming rituals. The modern audience would pity him because he's too young to remember the very little amount of peace in his short life, so wouldn't have been able to enjoy peace and miss it properly. Homer clearly wanted the Iliad to present war as it really was. The Iliad wasn't pro-war and it wasn't anti-war. Homer wanted to create the perfect balance between the two ideas. Homer's realism was vital to the nature of the Iliad. Johnston argues that the poem forces us over and over again to confront what really goes on when the soldiers fight. Homer does this through the use of Astyanax and Hector's relationships, the inevitability of war, and the idea of lost peacetimes. He presents the sorrow of war so successfully that it has passed the test of time and has lasted nearly 3,000 years.